Hello and welcome to the What the Finance podcast, where we talk to experts about all things finance. If you get value out of this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any in the future. I hope you enjoy.
Richard, thank you so much for joining the What to Finance podcast today. So everyone has their sort of story about how they got into crypto. Can you share yours? I'm sure you've heard many as well.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much, Anthony, for having me on your show. Pleasure for all your listeners out there to be speaking with you today. So a little bit about myself. My name is Richard Carthon. I am the host and founder of CryptoCurrent. The whole goal is to bridge the gap between people who know nothing about cryptocurrency and blockchain with thought leaders in the space. How this all even happened in the first place, back to the origin story. So back in 2018, I was working at this artificial intelligence company, and the first day on the job, my boss says, "Hey, what do you know about Bitcoin and Ethereum?" I was like, "Bitcoin and Ethereum, what's that?" He said, "Trust me, you want to look into it." So I did. I went down the rabbit hole, have never looked back. And a couple of things originally started happening once this happened, which was one, all the places that I would go to find more information about crypto and blockchain were either A, super technical, I couldn't understand what was going on, or B, here's how you get rich quick. Here's like how you become a crypto millionaire and have your Lambo and everything else, right? So I wanted to find a way to educate myself while also being able to educate others. And experience taught me that being able to interview people was a great way to get that done, right? So how do you have the ability to talk to really influential and intelligent people? What better way than having a platform where you can ask all the questions? So, like, even if you listen to any of our podcasts, you'll notice that as I interview, I'm coming from a very curious place because one, I am very curious about those things, but I also know the audience would be wanting to know these answers to questions as well. So that is basically my origin story. I got in early 2018, and I've been in the space ever since.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was like sort of at the peak as well, wasn't it? 20K or
It
peak back then.
was right. It
ICO,
was at the
crazy.
it was at the top of the last bull cycle, and I quickly saw everything go into the next bear market for the next 2 years. And so, and you would notice also a lot of chatter and news really slowed down during that time, and a lot of companies that stuck around were building for the future and building to last. A lot of these companies that kind of just sprouted up and shot up really quickly, but then lost all their value. A lot of them still aren't around. So it was cool to be able to really go through a bear market, because now this last bull cycle has been fun because I've seen how bad it can get, but I've also seen how the upside as well. So it's cool to be prepared as this kind of happens.
Yeah, definitely. I was sort of in a similar position where I think I got in like the day before it went below 6K. So I was just like, oh yeah, I put out like $100 in or whatever, and then literally halved in a day. And I was like, oh great, that's. But I think once you're into it, you're stuck, aren't you? It's just so interesting, and it's such an awesome space to be.
It is, man. And once you get in, you want to keep learning more. So like I've learned the best in my entire life with everything that I do is that you learn by doing and you learn by becoming involved. And so the beautiful thing about cryptocurrency at the beginning of this year, as y'all know, we've kind of been in this bullish cycle starting at the end of last year, around like October, November, that kind of crescendoed all the way up till April. And January, I started to see a lot of people starting in the market, right? So we broke past 20,000, which was the old high, all the way up to 30,000 at the beginning of the year. And I had a lot of people who I've been telling about crypto for years that all of a sudden everybody's hitting me up, right? And they all were asking me the same question. So what I did was I went and created this document called Crypto for Beginners, and I map out. It's like a 10-page document that kind of walks you through like all the things that I've learned. And then here's the fastest ways that you can start getting active in doing things on it. And one of the things that I have in there is that crypto is the greatest equalizer of our generation, of our time. And the reason I say that is because anybody has the opportunity right now to create generational wealth that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. Prime example, if you had put in $20 when Bitcoin first came out, when you could have first purchased it, at when it was worth $30,000, it'd be worth $9 million. Ethereum, if you had put in $20 when it first came out and you had the opportunity to get into it and you had waited till again January, you would have made six figures. You would have made, I think, like roughly 100 and something $1,000 in 10 years, in a decade. Now, you don't get those kind of ROIs on investments in a decade. It doesn't happen. A lot of people who come into crypto are trying to get rich quick, and I'm trying to make as much money as quickly as possible, and blah, 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 blah. But the reoccurring theme that keeps coming up with all of the speakers that I bring on the show are, I wish I never sold. I wish I hodled, which means hold on for dear life. And once you start realizing that crypto's not going anywhere, it's here to stay, and you start playing the long game, the opportunity for you to financially be in a place much faster than the regular trajectory of regular markets is just exponential. So yeah, I mean, I think I hear the passion in my voice. Like this really is for everyone. Anybody can get into this. And like, if you're not, shame on you. Cause like, this is literally for everybody.
Well, I'm sure you've been told as well, oh, it's too late. It's already at, 45,000. What do you tell people who say that?
When people said Bitcoin got to $10, it was too late. When it got to $100, it was too late. When it got to $1,000, it's too late. When it got to 10,000, you see where this is going.
Yeah.
It's not too late. Bitcoin on its current trajectory in the next decade has the opportunity to go up anywhere up to 300,000 to over $1 million in the next decade. And like, that's not fabricated. Like if you run the math, you run the numbers, that's the trajectory that this is headed. And if that is the case, even at as of this podcast, a $46,000 Bitcoin that potentially could be in the next decade, $300 to $1 million, $47,000 is cheap. But the other part of it too is you don't have to buy an entire Bitcoin. You can put in $100. You can put in whatever it is, because at the end of the day, it's all about a multiplier. So even if right now you get in at 47,000, right? And let's say you put in $1,000, and let's say that it goes up by 10x. Let's say it goes to 470,000 in the next decade. That means that $1,000 has not become 10 grand in a decade. You don't get those kind of returns anywhere, right? It doesn't happen. But not only Bitcoin and Ethereum are your two safest places to initially get in as a new crypto investor, but there are over 10,000 cryptocurrencies out there, right? And one big misconception about cryptocurrencies is that they're meant to be currency. So like a lot of people ask me, well, how are they all currency, or how are they all valuable? They're not. So imagine when the internet boom came out and all of these initial startups came out. What if they called them all like internet companies or whatever it is, right? They weren't. So Microsoft is very different than Apple, then very different from Amazon. Like they're all very different. In the same way, cryptocurrencies, they're blockchain startups. So blockchain is the base technology of cryptocurrency. They're blockchain startups under the umbrella that is known as cryptocurrencies. So just think of it as the regular startups that you would see in the world. So you know that basically 90% of all startups fail, and that holds true. But the 10% that don't are going to be insanely massive. So right, so like imagine Bitcoin and Ethereum as potential early Microsoft, Apple, all these others that like imagine ground floor. You got in at the very beginning. Like that is a lot in most of crypto right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that's quite interesting that I see a lot of people doing, and especially, I think hedge fund managers, the ones who can, they're putting 5-10% into these, into these coins. And that way, it's not a massive risk, but it's still, as you said, it can be massive for the portfolio over the long term.
It can. And no matter how you get into cryptocurrency, it is an investment. And so as you start to think about how you diversify your portfolio, there's a lot of ways to look at it. It's all about risk propensity and everything else. So so a little bit of background on myself. I used to be in wealth management. I was a financial advisor for Merrill Lynch for a while. I also have my own crypto hedge fund. So I know how to like break down and talk about these different things. And again, everything that I say today is not going to be financial advice. Here are things that I have personally been doing myself, and do whatever you want with this information. But as you look into diversification of whatever assets that you have, cryptocurrency should have a place in your life in one of those spaces. For me personally, since I'm a little bit younger, I have a much higher risk tolerance. I am heavily investing into cryptocurrency. I'm not saying that you should, but I would say consider somewhere between 5 and 15%. If you want to be more aggressive than that, have at it. Again, whatever you're more risky to do. The reason I say that is, and I'm only speaking for US citizens, I'm not sure how retirement plans work in the UK and across the world, but in the US, we have what's called 401ks and Roth IRAs and other things like that, which basically means once you retire and become of age of, I think 59 and then 65, you can tap into all of this money. It's either been pre-tax revenue or post-tax revenue, like once you cash out. But again, you cannot touch this money until that age. So if you die, it is what it is, or B, once you get to that age and you make it, you can't touch this without massive penalties of you having to pay a massive amount of taxes on this money. In crypto, like the same amount of time and money that you would be put into these 401ks, Roth, XYZ, if you were to take 5-10% of what would potentially be going that and putting it into crypto, and you do side by side over the next decade, that crypto will dominate your 401k. Like if you look at the last decade and you do the exact same thing, it's not even close. Like not even close. So it's like, why wouldn't you do it? And the other beautiful part about it is that it's liquid. If you need to get out, like right now, you go buy, let's say that you're making an investment fund for yourself or a savings, and you're deciding you want to, let's just use Bitcoin. You only want to use Bitcoin, right? So you put this aside. Let's say you're putting it away for 5 or 10 years. You personally just don't want to touch it. But then all of a sudden, let's say worst comes to worst, you got to go get this money. Like it's like you got to go get this right now. If it's a 401k or whatever, and you have to tap into it, all these penalties, all this stuff, you just lost it. Bitcoin, you can go liquidate this right now and you're good. You know, like you might not even have to liquidate all of it. You might have to get half, use it, and then the rest of it can keep building. But the point is that it's a liquid. And I mean, I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, but one final thing to kind of wrap up this thought, and what made me first believe in cryptocurrency and what made me really take this seriously. I had a friend who was working in the Philippines in oil and gas, and every time he'd make a check, he would send his money back to his family in the US. In between converting from the local currency to US dollar and wire fees and everything else, he would lose 40% of his money. So if he sent $100, only $60 showed up. And to do that same thing, it would take 5 to 10 business days. He said what he did instead was he converted to Bitcoin and he sent it. It would only cost him a couple of dollars and it'd only take a couple of minutes. I was like, that's all I needed to know. Like, where in the world can you do something international that fast? And where anywhere in the world that you go, a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. I was like, I'm sold.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing that sort of at the moment as well, as you said, with those sort of situations, but also, you know, with countries that have really, you know, hyperinflation. You can imagine people in Afghanistan as well at the moment. If they had money in Bitcoin, it'd be a lot better than having it in the local currency. So I guess it sort of provides protection as well from instability in certain countries internationally.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at some of the first countries that decided to change their currency into Bitcoin. I think they were doing it around 30,000. It's not 47. They've already made money, right? So everyone who's already like gotten into that, their literal country economy has increased in a month, like by almost like 30%. Like that doesn't happen unless like, but that's the kind of the opportunity that is. Now, at the same token, it could also go down that quickly in a blink of an eye in a month. And like, that's the challenge of it, but it's even still less risky than the local currency had to begin with. And if you were trying to get a loan, if you're trying to do other stuff, you now know have a currency that internationally you can trade, and you know its base value will be received, and you're not having to like have other countries receive, like look at your money as worthless. So a ton of value in that.
Yeah, definitely. And then sort of before, you mentioned obviously not all cryptos are currencies. Sort of where do you put Bitcoin in that regard? Do you see it as a currency? Do you see it, you know, medium exchange or maybe a store of value? What's sort of your opinion on that?
So Bitcoin is digital gold through and through. 5 unique characteristics to Bitcoin. One is that it is decentralized, so it's built on blockchain. What a lot of people don't know about the origins of Bitcoin, like why was it made in the first place, right? So you go back to 2008, it's the financial recession of basically the world, started in the US and kind of spread out through bad loans that were sent out in the financial crisis. So this person or people or whoever named Satoshi Nakamoto came together and created the Bitcoin white papers. And the unique characteristics and the power to the people that they intended to have was that, one, you created a currency that was decentralized, aka built on blockchain, so no one central entity owns it. Second is that it is finite, so there's only a finite supply of Bitcoin that will ever be made. 21 million. So basically, once we get there, that's it. So there's mining. So to create Bitcoin, they are mined. So these highly complicated problems that are being solved by Bitcoin miners are constantly going, and the last Bitcoin will be mined in 2140. So that's 2140. So probably past our lifetimes. And the reason that it is taking that long is because of halvening events. So every 4 years, the miners, they get a certain amount of rewards for every time that there's a successful mine. So you get rewarded in Bitcoin. So they have it every 4 years, which does a couple of things. It typically makes the price double almost every single time. If you go back and look at every halving event, shortly after, sometime between 3 months and a year, you see the price double, and that holds true. So if you look back to the last halving event, which I believe was around either last March or May, basically since that moment, it was around $8,000. It got all the way up to 60. So that was already like, basically a 6 to 7x in like a year, which is insane. So if you go back in history and look at a lot of those events, that's what happened. So anyway, going back, so decentralized, you have finite supply. You have that it is pseudo-anonymous, so you don't necessarily know who's sending it. You just get an address. So if you know who you're sending it to, great, but you really don't know who the person is unless they identify themselves, because they wanted that anonymity to give power to the people. 4 is that it is put on, or it's basically a one-way street, right? So it's immutable. So if you send someone crypto, you can't just get that back. So for example, if you were to send somebody money right now, the reason why it takes a while and they have to do all this stuff is to make sure it goes to the right person and there's no clawbacks. Well, in crypto, if I want to send you money or you want to send anybody money, it's a one-way street. After you send that money, it's gone. So if you send it to the wrong address, you mess up one of the like characters, that's on you. You just lost that money. So it's immutable. And then the last is the visibility. So it can be divided into 100th millionth of a decimal point. So that's 8 decimal points. And so because of that, that's how you're able to buy $5 worth of Bitcoin, because it's divisible up to that point. Because usually a question that comes up, well, if it's finite, it's only 21 million, how is it that people can still have it when people just have a bunch and then it's like whatever? Well, no, that's why, because of the divisibility, you're still able to buy fractions of the cryptocurrency. So put all that together, that's the basis of Bitcoin. All cryptocurrencies are based off of that. So Bitcoin was meant to be a store of value. So I would say it's more of a store of value, but it's also a currency and something that can go, because it's basically digital gold.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've sort of seen something as well come up recently about the energy costs. Do you think that's legit, or is that just a bit of a propaganda?
It's propaganda. It's legit, but like if you look at that cost compared to the cost of mining gold, that is it's not even close. So if digital gold, or if gold right now is basically how a lot of currencies are backed in like this actual asset that you can use that is deranged and perceived to have value, the amount of energy that goes into these mines and like getting all that to just get this amount of gold that we don't even really know how much gold is in the world, compared to Bitcoin that we know is finite, that is whatever. First, that's not even the same. And then 2, a lot of these miners are getting more green. They're finding more creative ways to use renewable energy to make it more efficient and everything else. So it was more propaganda than anything. But like, yeah, man, it's there. The pace at which Bitcoin mining is improving its green footprint on the world compared to other things that are perceived value, it's not close.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing sort of in Iceland, they have geothermic, and, it's going to all those sort of countries where it's very cheap electricity, and a lot of it's renewable as well, which is quite interesting. So if we go sort of back to the beginner, like you were mentioning before, what is one piece of advice that you wish you knew at the start of your crypto journey?
So the one piece of advice I would take is take your time, and it's a process. So when you're first getting into crypto, it can really feel like you are trying to drink water from a fire hose. It's just so much information all at once, and you only have a cup, right? So to be able to get a little sip of your cup every once in a while, you want to make sure you're not overflowing your cup, but just putting enough in there so that you can drink at a good pace. And a good way to do that is to find a couple of different outlets that provide really good content, really good ways that you can understand it, and that aren't trying to necessarily sell you on a bunch of stuff. So unfortunately, there are a bunch of platforms out there that are more interested in how they can be monetizing you than giving you information. And so find a good blend of people who are creating really good content and information that can empower you and to act, instead of just like saying, do this, like not say that like it's a ton of like direct directions of like, go buy this thing, go do this, instead of just saying like, hey, here are all of your options, here's some first steps you can take with each of these options, you pick. I think that is a lot more beneficial. And the other is time horizon. So I think a lot of people get very impatient with crypto. Like everyone thinks like, oh, if I get into this thing, everyone's super rich, or they've gotten super rich really quickly, or they learn about like, oh, I got into Doge when it was $1 and it went all the way up to 70 cents. I'm rich. Like, yeah, some people did that. And Doge, also on a quick side tangent, was never meant to be anything. It was actually made as a joke. Like it's a legit meme coin that had no value, but because so many people are paying attention to it, they're now trying to create value out of it. Like the original people who created it sold all of it before it even took off because they didn't believe in the project. Like we can unpack that another time, but point being is that there are a lot of really, really, really cool projects that are being built right now. And just like with any startup, like with any company, it's not just built overnight. It's not like instant success. They're usually, you know, they call it the 5 to 10 year overnight success, right? And a lot of these crypto companies that are new and whatever, and even if they explode and they have some initial good success, they take time to build out and to grow. Um, and the good ones can be absolutely life changing. I'll just give you one example. A good friend of mine who got into crypto before I did, was in early 2017. I got into this company that was called Thorchain. It's the symbol's called Rune, and was able to get in right at the beginning. Thor is now has 1,000x. So again, 1,000x. So no matter what you put in front of it, just put 1,000 behind it. So you put in $10, it's now worth 10,000. You put in 100, it's now worth 100,000. You put in 1,000, you're now a millionaire. So, and that was in 4 years. 4 years. So that kind of opportunity exists. And there's a lot of 1,000x opportunities. There's a lot of 100x opportunities. There's even more 10 to 25x's. There's a ton out there. But again, and the reason I talk in x's multipliers is because if you have a good time horizon and you find projects that are trying to build something, that are genuinely trying to do good things, you can see a massive amount of return in a short amount of time. There have been 3 projects that early when I got onto this show, I didn't know enough about, and like I didn't know how to like initially get in, and multiple of them have anywhere from 10 to 25x. And like literally, if I had just been like, all right, cool, like let me just put in this little investment and just see what happens, it'd have been a substantial return. So the whole point being is you find a really good project, understand it's going to take time, put in some money, and be patient. You don't have to get in, get out. You don't have to try to like flip your money if you're not a trader. So sorry, this is the last little tangent I'm going to go on. Is people think that they are traders, and they are not. They are investors. If you come in thinking that you are a trader, so these are people who are looking at the charts daily, hourly, constantly, trying to beat the market and make like a quick anywhere from 2 to 10% within an hour or whatever it is. People who have never done this before come in and think they can do that, and they get dominated by people who trade for a living. And so if you come in, if you want to be a trader, teach yourself, learn. You're gonna lose some money, but like after you figure it out, you're gonna make some. Like it happens to all of us. But if you come in as an investor, the price doesn't matter, because if you're like, I'm building a portfolio and you're playing with a longer time horizon, you win. You win. Like there was a stat that came out in Bitcoin at any point in Bitcoin's life, basically since like 2020 down, if you hadn't bought Bitcoin within 3 years, you would have made money. Like, so whether you bought at the top 2018, or if you bought at the top of like 2015 or whatever it was, every single time within 3 years, you were in the clear. So a lot of people come in and they're not used to the markets going down, or risk, or downward momentum. So they come in, they buy at the top. Let's say it's 2018 and they buy a $19,000 Bitcoin, and then they go down and they sell it when it's worth 3,000. And now it's all the way up to 40. If they had just been like, I'm gonna keep and hold this for 4 or 5 years, they'd be up 2x. They would have doubled their money in 4 years. And again, it goes back, or not even 4 years, in 3 years. So again, it goes back to time horizons of like how you're looking at this as an investment, not as a trader. But if you are going to be a trader, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely got the timing, because as you said, there's so many professionals. So you talked about about sort of innovations and some really exciting projects. Is there anything specific that you're personally watching, or any projects, any innovations that you think are, could have a major impact or are very exciting?
Man, there are several across all kinds of different speak tracks. So I'm just going to talk about a couple we had recently. So on episode 195 with Cryptocurrent, we talked to Eric Voorhees, the COO of Shapeshift. they have gone to a completely decentralized organization. So they are an exchange that is completely decentralized. So they don't have any custody of the coins that are there. So custody basically just means like if you were to go like on a Coinbase or some of these other, you go in, they KYC, you like have to give personal information, and then you're able to trade. So with Shapeshift, they don't do any of that. Basically, you could, as long as you can connect to connect your wallet, your Ledger wallet, or what have you, you can immediately go in and trade several different tokens. And they actually use Thorchain, which I talked about earlier, to set up a lot of the functionality to make all of that happen. But on top of that, they've now decided to not only just decentralize their exchange, but their entire organization. And so I think we could see a shift even in the workforce to a more decentralized organization. They're called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. So there's a lot to unpack with that one. So that was a really cool one. Depending on like what you think about like, because I am a hodler to two things that I plan on not selling anytime soon, because it's basically like my 401k, Bitcoin and Ethereum. We had this really cool show with Tantra Labs back on episode 149. And you basically can get like 12% APY, so annual percentage yield. So I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in the US, if you have a savings account, you're basically making nothing, like 0.01%. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Again, because I'm buying and holding this, 12% is amazing, and it's really cool that I can go in there and see like how much is already like yielded me and what it's worth and all that, and it's really cool. So that was a really good one. Another cool one that I saw was episode 142, and basically you can own your name on the internet. And I know that sounds nuts, but basically like the DNS. So with that is basically like, so like .com, .io, that all these things, like everyone's familiar with that. So there's this thing called Namebase, and it's built like on that. They use like what's called the Handshake, which is the coin that they use to like do their different exchanges. But you can go on this thing called Namebase, and you can basically buy like dot whatever you want. So like I have ones on there like dot my last name, dot like other little cool things I have, and like I own it. So it's like, because it's blockchain, you own it, and like you pretty much have it into perpetuity. You can like spin it up and build like a Web3 website on it if you want to, and other stuff like that. So like it's really cool. So you can go like find something and buy it, and then you can go back and resell it. So like it's like the new age, like people who would go and make, when the internet first came out and people bought a whole bunch of domains, there were people who literally went in and bought a bunch of stuff for cheap and then just resold it for thousands and thousands of dollars. It's wild. So that was another random cool one. I have plenty I can throw at you, but those are just a couple.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's some really cool things, and as you said, we're seeing that with NFT as well. So much stuff is going online, and so many things that that do have value. Like it could be royalties from records or from books, or all these different things are going online and going into blockchain, which is pretty crazy.
It is. And let me spend some time on NFTs, because NFTs is this whole own world. There's definitely a couple in there that I want to share with you. So Adrian Bushak with Eternity, that was episode 171. And again, that is with Eternity. And Eternity is this super cool platform where they're getting some really exclusive NFTs, like one they did with Tony Hawk, where basically you would buy his like one-of-one board that he like used in something that he signed, and then you would also get the digital copy of it as well. They think they just announced that they are releasing one with Lionel Messi, who is now with PSG. So there's some really dope stuff coming out with that. Eternity is amazing. Check out what they got going on. Like it's cool as a project, but they also have some really cool NFT things going on. Another one is Gaurav Seth. We just recently had him, and his company is called Mogul Productions. And what they're doing is allowing you to literally be like a media mogul. Like you will have the opportunity to buy their crypto, and now you can participate in picking up a video production. So imagine if you had the chance to vote on the options of like not to say that this is what these videos are going to become, but who knows, like a Star Wars or a Titanic or whatever. Like you could like see like, okay, here are the options, I'm going to pick one, and then because you invested in it and it goes into production, it actually goes into the big screen. If it performs well, you actually get a percentage of those benefits, because you get to go through the whole thing. Like you also potentially can get one-on-ones with people who either superstars that are in the show, or a one-on-one dinner with like the media director or stuff like that. Just a really, really cool NFT and DeFi play with what they got going on. So recommend checking that out. And then the final is just, and this was just really cool to me, was an episode called 184 with Jerome Dallas. He talks about like virtual reality and gaming and cryptocurrency. And he basically brought me into this thing where it's like virtual reality. He calls it the blockchain universe, and you go on, and it's literally like VR. You walk into this area where he has like a giant room that you could like talk in. He also has like these 2 art galleries where he literally get the NFTs that people have built, put them on the wall, and like people can virtually go in there and like have a virtual art gala. And it was so cool. Like it was like one of my like first virtual reality experiences, but then also like seeing it with like NFTs in like real life, like super dope. So like, I mean, there are so many dope projects out there and on the way.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the sort of one issue for me is obviously there's a high barrier to entry, so a lot of them can be quite expensive. Do you have any advice for maybe, people who don't have the money to invest in the whole NFT or anything like that, on how they can invest? Or
Yeah, so there are places like OpenSea. You don't have to go buy the expensive ones. You can go buy some. I mean, there's CryptoKitties. Like I got a CryptoKitty when it first came out. And because of it, I also got like this NBA like top shop thing, where basically I got like this like NFT card of like somebody an NBA player dunking on somebody. There's also like a bunch of other. You can go buy NFTs for cheap, for really cheap. There's another one called Wax. They have a bunch of like NFT projects out there, so you don't have to go spend. There's also one called superrare.io. They have like a ton of dope projects on there as well. But you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a really cool NFT that could be valuable in the future.
yeah, definitely. And I guess it's something, find a project you like and, buy it and then see how it goes from there. So one thing we've seen as well is it's quite interesting. So we've seen the infrastructure bill pass, but then for some reason, apparently, cryptos and blockchains and infrastructure. So sort of how do you see this impacting the industry and sort of DAOs and all that stuff that you mentioned before? Because it seems like it's bringing more regulation onto it.
Yeah, so with the regulation that just came in, what they tried to do is basically turn everyone that owns crypto into brokers. And the reason why that's not going to fly and why the IRS is actually going to go in and try to like change it regardless of what's ultimately passed is to do that. Right now, I think there's a couple like tens of thousands of brokers that they have to monitor and watch. If you turned everyone in the US who own crypto into a broker, you're looking at now probably over millions of people that you now have to monitor and do. And they're just like, that's not sustainable. That's not doable. No, that doesn't make sense. So because of that, that's probably going to be more helpful. And if you look at the news, even with like all of this starting to break, the price of crypto currently, like while all that was going on, was still appreciating. It was still going up. And the reason being is because there are some like advocates that were out there that are like pretty beneficial with advocating for innovation and wanting people in the crypto space to want to keep going, because they realize that if they lose this market or if they make it very hard for crypto investors to not be here, then all that money is going to go elsewhere and it's going to go overseas. And so for the different like senators and people that are out there, very beneficial. We actually just had an article on Cryptocurrent about this, where we break down like some different lobbyists and senators and everything else and what kind of happened. So highly recommend going and checking that out on our site.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that a lot of them are sort of regulating it, but they have no idea. Let's be honest, they have no idea they might know Bitcoin, but other than that, I'm sure they're clueless.
That's it. Surface level. That's it. They know the name, but can't really talk to it.
Yeah, literally. So sort of, are there any stories that you've heard from guests on your podcast that just stand out and you're like, holy shit, or wow?
Yeah. So the one that made me like actually start buying and believing in Bitcoin. So even though like as I was first learning and was very aware of Bitcoin and everything else, like I didn't get into it or start buying it just because like, oh, it's too much. Like, I can't afford it. I'm gonna buy this other stuff that like's more quote unquote affordable and everything else. And his name's John Pritzker. He is part of Swan. He's the CTO. One of my most memorable interviews, because he single-handedly helped convince me to like be buying Bitcoin right now. And essentially he was telling me the story. So he's Jewish, and his grandma, I believe, was in one of the concentration camps. And when she left, and left to flee the Americas. I think the only thing that she had like left was like this like necklace, and then one of the guards took it. So it came to the U.S. and had nothing. And so with that, he was saying, right now, if you had to flee your country, or if you had to go anywhere in the world right now, and you only had 10 minutes to gather all of your belongings and all of your wealth and had to dip, there is nothing greater than Bitcoin. Why? One, you can put that thing on a flash drive or on a wallet or whatever it is. So like, you really never got to go nowhere. As long as you can grab those two things, put in your pocket and dip, you're good. And then also, no matter what country you go to, because it's international, you can quickly transfer it for local currency, and you also still have a store of value, because if you don't sell it all, it's going to probably keep appreciating in value. And if it's going to be digital gold, that means you're buying potential digital gold at cents on the future dollar that it's going to be worth. I was like, yep, that's a really good argument. I'm gonna start buying this.
Yeah, that's crazy. And when you put it like that, it's so true. And you see it. You don't really like. Sometimes you don't realize how unstable things are. So you just have to be prepared for almost any outcome, don't you?
Right. I mean, just to make it to real time right now, we see what's going on with Afghanistan. Like, don't know how many of them are in crypto, but like a lot of them are literally fleeing their country and trying to find ways out. And if they had like crypto or anything else, like literally fleeing the country, there's nothing more than I would want than my currency being in Bitcoin and having a way out.
Yeah, I think you saw people like queuing up at banks and they couldn't take the money out because
Right.
they didn't have it. So I guess that's a real life example, unfortunately, of what can happen. So Richard, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I've just got one more question. So what is sort of one message you'd like listeners to take away from our interview?
So the biggest takeaway, if you've been listening today, is learn about cryptocurrency and get involved. Take action, and if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask them. A great place that if you do have questions is to come to us at Cryptocurrent. If you want more information, go to crypto-current.co. We're also on all social channels. If you look us up on Cryptocurrent, one of our biggest followings is on Twitter. It's _cryptocurrent _. And you also go find us on YouTube. A lot of our videos, we do about a podcast, but we also do videos on there as well. We're producing brand new content pretty much daily, and we just want to empower you. We want you to have the tools so you can feel really good whenever you decide to take the leap of faith and start making some initial investments. So I would just encourage everyone, if you're not in crypto, find a way to get into it sooner than later, aka today. Maybe today's a beautiful time to do it, if not tomorrow. But find a way to get in and truly put together a plan of how you can start diversifying into cryptocurrency.
Perfect. And if someone want to get in contact with you, would that be the best platform, or do you have your own socials as well?
Absolutely. So on Twitter, you can just find me at Richard Carthon. You can also find me on my Instagram, Richard_Carthon. And if you just reach out to Cryptocurrent, it'll find its way to me. So just make sure you reach out, and happy to help however I can.
Perfect. Sounds good. And I'll put that all down in the description below. But yeah, Richard, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Of course. Thank you.